Baker Mayfield, a pretty big domino, I think, for this offseason pre-training camp to fall. Baker Mayfield trade. He is on his way from the Cleveland Browns to the Carolina Panthers. What does that mean for the Browns? What does that mean for the Panthers? What does that mean maybe for some other ancillary quarterbacks and teams around the NFL as these dominoes fall as we head toward 2022? All that coming up right now.
You're listening to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show, your daily podcast on the National Football League, powered by the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock and Matt Williamson with you at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. If you don't know us, hi, I'm Brian Peacock, NFL analyst. That is Matthew Williamson. You know his work from ESPN for years. You can read his work about the Steelers right now. He's doing radio about the Steelers in the Pittsburgh area. We've got a West Coast, East Coast thing going on here. I'm also the host of Locked On 49ers, and Matt, of course, you know, former Akron, Pitt, Cleveland Browns scout. He knows his stuff. And I just tee it up for Matt Williamson in most cases. Today's biggest news is the Baker Mayfield trade, Matt. And Baker Mayfield on his way to the Carolina Panthers. Really just a dump of Baker Mayfield, who, while his star doesn't shine as bright as it did going into the 2021 football season, former number 1 overall pick in the same draft as Sam Darnold, who's currently the quarterback of the Carolina Panthers, was the number 3 overall pick. His star doesn't shine as bright as it did, but man, the Browns picking up $10.5 million of his $18 million salary. Baker Mayfield taking a pay cut of $3.5 million as well to facilitate this trade. So the Carolina Panthers giving up a conditional 5th-round pick, not this coming draft, in 2024, and only taking on $5 million of Baker Mayfield's salary to get a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL. For just this move alone for the Panthers, seems pretty good on paper, but the Panthers have been doing a lot of other things at quarterback the last couple of years that none of this adds up, makes any sense in the end, but at least this deal makes sense for the Panthers on its own, and it is just really a bargain of a starting quarterback that the Panthers just got, and maybe gives them an opportunity to salvage this season and Matt Rule's job.
100%. I mean, I have a hard time being critical of the Panthers side of this at all. I mean, frankly, I think the Browns have kind of botched this from the beginning and, burned this Baker bridge, and now we're paying for it. And let's start with what I think of Baker as a player. I mean, first of all, coming out of school, I would not have taken him 1st overall. His rookie year, when he won Rookie of the Year, I thought he was a little overrated, because if you look at the defenses they played, they were all meaningless games. But I'm trying to be as impartial as possible with this guy. I mean, he tore a labrum in his shoulder in week 2 or 3 last year, then had like 100 other injuries after that, and still played through it all. And I understand the scouts' look on things of, it only matters what you show me between the white lines. Well, I'm not that old school. I mean, I think you have to put some context in what you saw. I think he has, I don't want to say limitations, maybe limitations, even on his best day. He has warts. There's no question about that, and we can get into some of that. But really, I very much believe he is the 15th to 20th best quarterback on the planet. He's a starter. I mean, he's a legit dude. And we can talk about strengths and weaknesses if you want, fit, all those things. But I think a lot of people have sold him short. Nobody wants Baker. He's a backup. He's useless. He's 1,000 times better than Sam Darnold.
Oh, he's a lot better than Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
And it's funny because Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield might both throw the ball to the other team a little too much, but it happens very differently. And Baker Mayfield's the type of guy to want to try to make things happen and might throw into some mistakes where Sam Darnold is quote unquote seeing ghosts, right?
Yeah.
And there's some big plays that do sometimes happen because he's a talented guy. But the end result is much different to me. And Baker Mayfield has displayed he's much more ready to lead an NFL team on the field than Sam Darnold is as far as his play on the field. Now, leading a team off the field is where there's also been some problems with Baker Mayfield in Cleveland and some personality stuff. And now look, if you had a personality conflict with Odell Beckham, get in line, right? Because it's not he hasn't had conflicts with teams already in the NFL and certain quarterbacks, and it's not quite TO level weirdness, but Odell's a different guy, and his buddy from LSU on the same team, Jarvis Landry. It seemed like there was definitely a team Baker and a team former LSU receivers there in Cleveland, and now all of those guys are gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. I mean, so I think you can't question Mayfield's competitiveness, dedication, all those things. And I thought he showed that in spades last year, playing through all those injuries. Some of the things that concern me about him, people think that height is overrated. It's not. I mean, Wilson, Breeze are Hall of Fame level quarterbacks, but they have made up for their lack of height for several reasons. They're phenomenal moving around the pocket. The Saints were unbelievable in terms of providing Breeze with guards and centers that were at the best level out there. The Browns did the same thing with Mayfield. But all those guys, and it's still true with Wilson, they sometimes just don't see open receivers in the middle of the field. That's really where height can bother you, is there's a lot of trees, and sometimes you don't see the open guy coming across the middle. And therefore, Mayfield scrambles a lot, gets out of the pocket. He's not a great pocket mover like Breeze was. I always talk about Breeze with his tennis background. He just move a couple little steps, stay in his position to hit the ball again, and he was great at that. Mayfield has a terrible habit of when things go bad, he rolls to his right. And everyone in the world knows it now. Like, I've watched him every game against the Steelers, of course. He rolls right into TJ Watt, and Watt knows he's coming. It happens time and time again. The Steelers have this blueprint of just getting big and rushing him, knowing he's going to roll right into TJ Watt, and it always goes badly. So that's what teams do. And part of it is because rolling to your left is really hard. NFL football throwing to your left, often against the grain, and he doesn't do it well. So he needs to work on that. Will he ever get that right? I don't know. I like his arm strength, but I think his arm strength is overrated because when you watch him throw the football, he loads up like Brett Favre and throws these massive fastballs. But the guys with real arm strength are the Mahomes that flick their wrist and get the same velocity. He loads everything up and tries to knock people over, and that's not functional.
He does, and one of the things that happens when you're a college player and you load up and you've got a really good arm, it's like, wow, this guy's got an NFL arm, or you see him run around. He's got athleticism too. But when you get to the NFL, you're 4'8", 540, doesn't play as well, and you're not as elusive. Right. And when he winds up like Brett Favre's throwing 95-mile-an-hour fastballs, he's throwing an 87-mile-an-hour fastball.
Exactly.
So exactly. Comes out a little differently, and a lot of hero ball involved there. So
I think his athleticism's a little below the line too. It's at the line. If you're small, you better be athletic. And I think Nate Tice calls him an unathletic Russell Wilson. In the Big 12 winning Heisman's, he's athletic enough.
Which is why I thought his best fit was Seattle, because of the style he plays and making some big throws to some of those receivers they have, and probably a bad fit with Stefanski's offense, really, even though he played well in it. Because, you mentioned Drew Brees is one of those shorter quarterbacks. Drew Brees is the king of getting the ball out in 2.3 seconds, right? And 2.5 and under is where you want to be, especially in that West Coast style of offense. And Baker Mayfield's not really that type of guy. So we'll see what that looks like with McAdoo. McAdoo's offense is interesting because he's, like Eli Manning was a guy that got the ball out quick. And when McAdoo was running that offense, it's sort of a West Coast, he's a West Coast guy, but he's not as under the center West Coast like Stefanski and Shanahan are. He's a little bit more shotgun West Coasty. So I wonder if that will help Baker Mayfield a little bit. It'll feel a little bit more like his college offense. It'll be a little bit more spread, and he'll be able to see the field a little bit. But it's still, West Coast family of offenses. I still think Seattle's a better fit, but I think maybe McAdoo's offense could be better for Mayfield than Stefanski's offense was.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I brought this up recently, but Ben and I GA'd together at Pitt for a year. He was the offensive graduate assistant. I was a recruiting guy. And the defensive dude, we were in this little room together. I mean, just a sweaty, disgusting little room that he slept there all the time. And, the GA room, so we were like the pledges, So Ben's a good dude, works extremely, extremely hard. And you're right. I mean, I think the McAdoo fit isn't quite as good as Seattle. You've done a great job the last month or two talking about Stefanski's not a great Baker fit. the Russell Wilson Seattle is, and I 100% agree with you. And I think Ben's somewhere in between. They do throw the ball a lot in McAdoo's system. I think they'll utilize McCaffrey really well. But looking back at those Giants days too, they fed Odell like crazy. You know, short slants. Like DJ Moore shot up my receiver list for fantasy. You know what I mean?
Okay, let's pause right there. Yeah, because I think a big winner of this as it pertains to the Panthers side of things, not only Matt Rule potentially, if Baker Mayfield is the guy and is a nice step above Sam Darnold, but we got to talk about the receiver room as well. So let's focus Panthers next, and we'll talk Cleveland Browns because there's a big conversation with the Browns about what they do now, because if Watson's gone, they're down to Jacoby Brissett, and that's about it with Baker Mayfield now officially no longer in Cleveland. But first, let's let the folks know about our friends at Built Bar. Coconut Brownie Chunk Puff, one of the newest flavors of bars at Built.com. And not only do they have the traditional Built Bar coconut brownie chunk flavor, but they also have the puff treatment as well for the coconut brownie chunk flavor. Coconut brownie chunk puff. It's a lot of words, but what are we talking about here? We're talking about deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. I'm more of a standard Built Bar guy, I think, Williamson. Or your family's more of a puff family? Did I read that correctly?
It's hard to say because every time they arrive, they last very, very short amount of time. My son is 15. I'm just under 6'3", 6027. He just passed me and lifts every day. So they vanish like the second they arrive. So I'm not sure that any of them get shortchanged, to be very honest.
Yeah. A growing teenager that might be on a lifting program would like that delicious flavor and also would like the 17 grams of protein that comes in most Built bars. High in protein, low in calorie, low in sugar. That's what we're talking about. I don't know how Built does it, but they make a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, the best tasting protein bar on the market. You can get some with 15% off with our promo code at built.com right now. Whether it's coconut, brownie, chunk, or any of the flavors, or a mixed box of Built bars, go to built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. That is promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Thanks again, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out everything that is happening on the Locked On NFL channel. We've got experts daily talking about the entire league. And, of course, the Locked On NFL YouTube channel is the home of Peacock and Williamson as well. Okay, Matt. So the Carolina Panthers. Let me just talk about DJ Moore for a second to get this out of the way, because I think it's important. He's one of the better wide receivers in the league. He signed his extension sooner than some of the top receivers we're seeing right now, or else we'd be talking about him as a $25 million a year guy, right? And he's probably kicking himself like thinking, man, I should have maybe waited an extra year before I signed my extension. But he's really talented. He's good after the catch. And I think there's a lot more there with him. And he's been remarkably good and remarkably consistent. But I mean, stock through the roof. And I don't even know if a fantasy ADP, and we haven't talked about our fantasy war room with wide receivers yet. I don't know if fantasy ADP could even catch up to DJ Moore. He's going to be on all my rosters this year now that Baker Mayfield's in town. And he's a guy that's not afraid to let it rip. And I think DJ Moore is going to be a huge beneficiary of Baker Mayfield coming to town.
100%. I've always been a Moore believer. In a way, him and McLaurin remind me of each other in that they're not quite in that top tier, but they're really good all-around players, and both of them have been really hindered by poor quarterbacks over their career. And now, you know, Wentz and Mayfield, to me, are in the same tier. You know, they both might have a good quarterback situation. It's not Mahomes, I get that, but it's a good spot. I mentioned the Beckham usage, a lot of quick slants, you know, from Beckham, then go after the catch. Moore's even better after the catch. He's a little more physical. And I really remember the year that DJ Moore played with Teddy Bridgewater. I guess that was 2 years ago. When you watch Carolina tape, there were so many, frustratingly many, big plays downfield where most quarterbacks would have let it fly and Teddy didn't. He checked it down to McCaffrey. You know, it's like, and Baker will let it fly.
Absolutely. Robbie Anderson, he publicly I think badmouthed Baker Mayfield earlier on in the offseason when that was one of the rumored things, and he's backtracked on that. He says he's okay with it, and I think he's going to like Baker Mayfield because he's not afraid to let him rip. And Robbie Anderson's that vertical threat in the offense. They got Terrace Marshall. They got a lot of weapons there for Baker Mayfield now. They needed to figure out quarterback, and maybe they did. And look, I love the chip on your shoulder revenge tour, Baker Mayfield. I don't know if he's going to be a superstar quarterback from here on out or anything like that, but I just like I like the value that they got in Baker Mayfield with that move on its own. But Matt, when you talk about the Panthers and what they've done in total over the last couple of years, but even this offseason, it really feels like, and this is where you got to crush both the Browns and the Panthers. What is your plan? You guys are professionals at the top of the heap of your profession, and you look like you have zero plan with what's going on with these things, with the most important position on your team. So the Panthers traded for Sam Darnold before last season. They traded a 6th-round pick in the 2021 draft, plus a future 2nd and 4th for Sam Darnold. The Jets just ended up with Breece Hall with one of those picks, right?
Not bad. Right.
In this draft. So a 2nd, a 4th, and a 6th. And you got Sam Darnold, and they picked up his 5th-year option, which they are regretting because now he's going to be an $18 million backup quarterback. Unless they can find someone, maybe he ends up in Seattle. I don't know. The Panthers then traded in this year's draft, pick 137, a 4th-rounder this year, plus a future 3rd to draft Matt Corral. So you think, okay, well, they didn't do anything else in free agency. They didn't make any trades. Then they went and spent more picks on a rookie quarterback. So it's Darnold and Corral. That may be a bad plan, but that's the plan, it seems like. Now they've traded a conditional 5th-round pick for Baker Mayfield. Plus they have the salaries of Mayfield, which, they're only doing $5 million, but you still, you've got $25 million wrapped up in your quarterback room still. And still some questions about what that is, how good that's going to be. But after all these moves, it just really seems like they don't have a plan. They've spent a 2nd, a 3rd, 2 4ths, a 5th, and a 6th, and now have this quarterback room of Mayfield, Arnold, and Corral. And the last move was actually as bargain as you can get. But really, I just start questioning the Corral one. Is the Darnold move was bad, and now in hindsight, picking up the 5th option, you're like, okay, well, that's awful. And then they just the 4th and the 3rd for Corral, who's clearly like, I don't know, let him fall to you at least. I just don't understand what the plan was if they were going to go do this Baker Mayfield thing. So I just feel like they're doomed either way because who's running the ship here?
Yeah, I hear you there. And I'm sure there's some people saying, well, now they're going to win enough games that they're not going to get CJ Stroud or, so.
Well, and that's, they could hurt themselves later. And then guess what? Baker Mayfield's a free agent. So Sam Darnold. So you have Matt Corral, and that's it going into next year. You got to spend more picks or more money.
A lot to unpack there. And I think you opened the show, and I agree with this if this is how you said it. This deal in itself, I think, is excellent. $5 million in a conditional mid-round pick for the 20th best quarterback in the league, considering what you have, in a nutshell, is a great deal, especially compared to what they paid for Darnold, what Washington paid for Wentz, what Indy paid for Wentz, what Indy paid for Ryan. All these guys that have moved lately that aren't superstars. I'm not talking about the Russell Wilson trade, but the 15th to 20th best quarterback guys that people are trying to dig into. Well, they got the cheapest one and maybe the best one. Who knows? I mean, they're all kind of the same to me if I'm ranking them, but they paid the least for them. Another Corral note is this bothers me a little bit because Pickett went and then there was a big gap and then all the other guys kind of went the same. Well, when you look at the draft value chart, Carolina paid more for Corral than any other quarterback not named Pickett, but they got the 5th one or the 4th one. Again, you're overspending. More than if you do the math, it's like you paid more for the 5th, 4th guy than the team that paid for the 2nd guy. I wonder. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I just read this today. Since Darnold has been a starter, he has the worst EPA in the entire league. He's the only starting quarterback with a negative EPA. And I don't know a ton about EPA. I need coached up on that. But if you look at any category in the world, he's last. There's not one good thing he's good at. I mean, he's bad at everything. I wonder if they could recoup a little by, we'll pay $18 million of Sam's contract. You give us a conditional 6, then we'll get him out of here to a team like Buffalo or Kansas City or somewhere he's totally non-threatening and tries to do a Trubisky rebuild your career year as you sit,
And by the way, for those of you who don't know, EPA is expected points added, and it's an advanced number that is trying to encompass everything that's going on in an offense. And some people say that EPA is too much of what a coach and the rest of the team brings in. So you can't really look at it as like, this is just the quarterback stat, but that's kind of any quarterback stat, right?
Sure.
Whether it's QB wins or, quarterback rating, they're all imperfect, but EPA is a pretty good measure of, just one number, one stat, and, how good is that quarterback in that offense. And Darnold has been bad in every offense.
No matter what metric you use, DVOA, advanced stats, my stupid spreadsheet conversation. I mean, it doesn't matter. He's last in every one.
Absolutely.
I think the Panthers are a contender now, though. And by contender, I don't mean they're better than the Bucs or the Rams or going to the Super Bowl. I think they're at that Viking level of the NFC. They could be the 6th seed. They could be the 7th seed. Their O-line really improved. McCaffrey's healthy, at least for now. The defense, to me, is vastly underrated. Another thing I saw today about the defense, only 2 defenses faced more drives than Carolina's defense. And that defense's starting average field position was the worst in the league because of Sam Darnold and the awful offense. They got no help from the other side of the ball. They don't have a lot of holes right now.
A healthy Baker Mayfield is above the equilibrium of NFL quarterbacks, starting quarterbacks, and that was the big negative on this football team. DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Terrace Marshall at wide receiver. They just drafted Ekwonu, what they really needed. So there's your franchise tackle. We'll see how sometimes it takes offensive linemen a little bit of time. So we'll see what he looks like as a rookie. But they've spent resources recently, 3rd rounder as well last year on Brady Christensen. We got Taylor Moton.
Bozeman's a starting center and Corbett's a starting guard. I mean, they have 3 new starters on what was a terrible O-line. And Moton's already a good right tackle. I think their line will be above average.
Yes, if you'd be just average or better offensive line, Baker Mayfield now a quarterback, McCaffrey healthy. We'll see how long that goes. They drafted, Chuba Hubbard last year. They got, some bodies there to back him up. And then on defense, Brian Burns, who's one of the more, he's like the DJ Moore of defense, right? Like nobody gives these guys credit out of Carolina, how good they are. Brian Burns is a straight up stud. They drafted Derek Brown a couple years ago on the interior. You got Yetur Gross-Matos, and
I'm a big Shaq Thompson fan. Chin. I think Horn has a chance to be a shutdown corner.
Right.
They got guys.
Yeah, last year they were without Horn the entire year. Their first round draft picks. You got J.C. Horn, Jeremy Chin, Dante Jackson. You've got C.J. Henderson, who was a top 10 pick that they traded for last year, right before the season 2, and he's your number 3 corner, right? So the defense could be good. The offense could be good. So they could be good, right? As long as Matt Rule and Ben McAdoo don't screw things up. So
I'm thinking 9 wins is possible, in that neighborhood.
And look, some things bounce great for you. You got 11 wins.
Right.
I mean? And maybe they're a 7-win team too. But this team should be able to compete now. Quarterback was so important. So the Baker Mayfield move alone, I like that they weren't afraid to do a good deal after the multiple bad deals they made at quarterback. At least they might have found something this year, and then next offseason we'll talk about the Panthers again, trying to figure out quarterback still. Maybe and maybe they just re-up Baker Mayfield and they love him and they were a playoff team with him. They're like, heck, let's go with Baker.
Yep, and you're right. I mean, when the season ends, all they have is Corral, who they must like. I mean, great. I mean, they paid up for him. We get that, but they could franchise Baker. They could talk extension with him before the free agency if things go well, or they could just let him walk and get a 3rd-round comp pick for him. Somebody's going to give him $20 million next year, no matter what. You're going to win in the comp pick game. Worst case situation.
Or franchise tag him.
Yeah, right.
Knows, maybe even trade him if a tag and trade situation could pop up, or maybe they just want to see one more year of him.
Maybe they love Corral a year from now. I mean.
We'll see.
It's a good situation.
Better now.
There's also a human element. It also probably saves Matt Rule's job. I mean, better.
If they don't play well, he was going to be gone anyway. So
I like it.
All right. So that is the Panthers side of things. Let's get to the Cleveland Browns side of things, what they do now and what this deal looks like for them currently. First, I want to let the folks out there know about rockauto.com. If you've got a car that resembles some NFL franchises that, needs some work, maybe you can go spend the equivalent of a future conditional 5th-round pick at rockauto.com and get yourself, a starting caliber part for your car. It's amazing the stock that Rock Auto has. Like, they can carry everything, and it's just impossible for your chain store or car dealership to have all of these items in stock, like rockauto.com. And when you go to that chain store, you're paying 50%, even 100% more for the same exact parts. And who knows if they have it in stock, how long you got to wait. You go to your dealership to get it fixed and you don't have a car for a week and you're paying hundreds of extra dollars in labor when you could probably fix your car yourself, as I found out recently when I went to rockauto.com, got a part for $40, a fender flare that popped off on the freeway, when who knows, hundreds of dollars and days, weeks later, it might have taken me to fix my car if I went the traditional car dealership route and just took my car in. So go to rockauto.com right now, a family-owned business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto prices are always reliably low for do-it-yourselfers and professionals alike. Everything you could need: brake parts, tail lamps, wiper blades, jumper cables, fender flares, big parts, small parts. If you are a car guy, oh my God, rockauto.com is the place for you as well. So go explore their easy-to-use website today, rockauto.com. Right now, check them all out. Check out the parts available for your car or truck, and man, they will have your parts in stock. It's pretty amazing. Right, locked on in there. How did you hear about us box? So they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. The Cleveland Browns, $10.5 million in dead money from this Baker Mayfield contract just to see him go and get a little something for him. This was basically, okay, this is the best we can do, because the other alternative was just release him and eat all $18 million. So they got at least, $8 million cut off of that salary that they had to take care of themselves. It was dead money. So now it's 10.5 dead instead of almost 19 million in dead money for Baker Mayfield. And they got a conditional pick in 2024, which might be a mid-round player. Who knows who that ends up being for them. But it was better than nothing, better than paying the entire salary. Not a great deal. This whole thing has been handled awfully by the Cleveland Browns. And now they have the guy they thought was going to be a backup quarterback and the guy they thought that was going to be a third-string quarterback and probably not even make the roster. Jacoby Brissett and Joshua Dobbs are their quarterbacks. Now what for the Cleveland Browns, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, as it stands right now, they're spending about $65 million this year on quarterbacks. And I think they'll have the worst or second worst opening day quarterback in the league. That in itself isn't so great, folks. $65 million for Jacoby Brissett to take the opening day snap is a real problem. I think Brissett's a really high-end backup. I'm a Brissett fan, but he's not as good as Mayfield. I mean, he's not certainly nearly as good as Watson. So I think they need to know the Watson situation before any other steps are made. And I'm going to bring up Jimmy. I mean, I have mixed feelings about that because they have a ton of cap space still this year, and then their cap is a disaster going forward. They can afford to put Jimmy in this year's cap. He's the only candidate that I see that is an upgrade or worth it. Or do you kind of punt the season and say, I don't want to give up any more picks. I've already given up a lot for these guys. I'm going to trade Kareem Hunt for a fifth or a fourth and just, lick my wounds and wait till Deshaun comes back. But that doesn't do you that much good either because your first round pick belongs to Houston, so it's not like you're going to get Will Anderson out of the deal, so my bet, and I'm not even sure if I condone this or not, is Jimmy somehow ends up in Cleveland after a ruling of Deshaun being suspended for the year. Because if it's 10 games or 12, you can't have Jimmy, Brissett, and Watson all in the same quarterback room. So I think Watson will get a year or more, or at least he'll get a year, and then they'll trade for Jimmy, and then they'll run the ball, and they'll win 7 games.
And that's where the indefinite suspension comes in, too, because levy that suspension sooner, allow everyone to know what the heck is going on, and basically everyone would know Deshaun Watson's not playing this year. And
you have to know that first, though.
Right. That would be that for now. They can't go make a deal for Jimmy and then all of a sudden have Watson come back in week 4 or something like that. Because if it was a 4-week thing, a 6-week thing, I think we all know it's not going to be that, though. Like, do they even need to wait? I guess they could
probably know.
Hope. And maybe there'll be, so maybe this thing has to go a little bit longer. The question is, from the 49ers side, do they allow Jimmy to come to camp if it does last another 3 weeks? Or once he's cleared, do they just release Jimmy and let him go figure out his next home on his own? And I think money-wise, it would end up being the same, because either way, Jimmy's people would negotiate with Cleveland's people, and they would come out to the same conclusion probably. But Jimmy would probably rather, if he's going to end up somewhere, rather it be a little bit of a trade. And that way he can negotiate from $25 million instead of being a free agent, where it's like, well, we're the only team left, so here's $4 million.
There's one starting spot left. It's yours, but you're not going to pay much.
Here's some mediocre backup quarterback money, and good luck if you don't want to take it. But if he's already got a contract, maybe they can negotiate something. Maybe Cleveland can send some money back to the 49ers. What about Kareem Hunt to the 49ers?
Yeah, I've heard that. I mean, who says no if it's just straight up?
That was brought up to me on actually today's Locked On 49ers podcast that we recorded last night. And it makes some sense, because $6 million of salary to offset that, you can negotiate your restructure, pay cut, whatever, with Jimmy Garoppolo, and he's going to have to make less. He's not going to make $25 million from anyone, whether it's 49ers, Browns, or whoever, whether he's traded or cut. The 49ers could get a running back, which Kyle Shanahan.
It's an upgrade to me.
By the way, Kareem Hunt and Kyle Shanahan's offense. Where's that in your fantasy?
My fantasy, he's going like first round turn.
Seriously, right? Like that all of a sudden is a league winner.
Yeah.
Because he's not behind Nick Chubb anymore. So, maybe something creative like that, and maybe a trade helps. And I talked about this with the Panthers, where they needed a trade for a quarterback because draft picks would be the way to make a team be okay with taking on some of Sam Darnold's salary, and they still weren't even able to do that. And it's funny because the Panthers are like, oh, we're not trying to trade Sam Darnold. Like, well, nobody's going to trade for Sam Darnold's $18 million.
You're basically giving him away.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of an Osweiler deal. You might have to pay us to take him.
Yeah. And who knows, maybe they can, get the Seahawks, maybe, the USC connection with Pete Carroll. Maybe there's a, Carroll didn't coach Sam Darnold, but
I think it would have to be a lesser version of the Mayfield deal, though.
Right.
Like, we'll eat a big chunk of his salary, give us a less pick than we paid for Baker, and you take Sam, get him out of here, and if he starts 12 games for you, we get a 5th instead of a 7th or whatever.
Yeah, maybe Sam Darnold is willing to take a pay cut like Baker Mayfield did to compete for a starting job somewhere else. Maybe he thinks he can beat out Drew Lock and Geno Smith better than he can beat out Baker Mayfield, right? Maybe. And so maybe it's a very similar deal, money going different directions, and the Seahawks only take a few $1 million and try to resurrect Darnold's career, something like that, lesser version of the Mayfield deal. Still possibility, but
so real quick, Seattle aside, though, if I'm Darnold, I want to go back up Russell Wilson for a year, or Josh Allen, sit on the bench, learn, have a good preseason.
The Trubisky plan.
The Trubisky move, right, right. And, try to build my reputation back up by not doing anything.
Yeah. As far as Jimmy to the Browns, I think it makes a ton of sense. The Cleveland Browns are set up much like the 49ers were last year. You've got to have a capable quarterback. Stefanski's offense, it's the Kubiak Shanahan tree, right? So Jimmy G can walk in, know the terminology, learn the other wrinkles of the offense. You're running 2 tight ends. You've got a defense that you're leaning on. You've got a running game. That's exactly with the same exact quarterback in Jimmy Garoppolo. That was basically the formula for the 49ers making it to the NFC Championship game last year. And if you're trying to win, and you've got a window to win in a good roster in Cleveland, go figure out quarterback, right? Even if you have to pay a little bit more and you've got a ton of salary. I'm sure the Browns' plan was to, roll all of that $40+ million into next year's cap so they could pay Watson and everybody else, because the cap's going to, the cap's going up, but their salaries are going to shoot up too. And the cap space might be a problem for the Browns next year. But right now they've got enough space. They could take on Jimmy's entire salary.
They could.
They don't have to, and they won't have to, but they can fit Jimmy in. So do you want to be better at quarterback? Do you want some competition for Jacoby Brissett? Do you want to roll Brissett and Dobbs this year? It's a big question. I think it's super easy, and they should be able to make this thing all work out, whether it's Jimmy's released and just signs with the Browns, or they work out some kind of a trade for not a ton of compensation. Maybe some money goes back to the 49ers to offset Jimmy Garoppolo's, newly restructured contract with the Browns. But it makes too much sense, Jimmy to the Browns. And I'm sure the 49ers would rather trade, even if they don't get much back and it's not really that much of a net gain. I'm sure they'd rather have Jimmy go to Cleveland than, if he's released, the possibility of signing with the Seattle Seahawks. Right.
And I don't think all of a sudden, boy, Seattle's back there, a powerhouse, if they have Jimmy and the whole West is worried again. I mean, but you don't want him in the West, and you'd much rather throw him in Cleveland.
Even if you think he's not a great quarterback and it's not going to help Seattle that much, you just don't want all that knowledge of your team on your
how you do things.
roster.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's better than what Seattle has. The only sticking point from your Niners standpoint is I would consider, if I were them, waiting. Maybe Matt Ryan blows out a knee. I'm not wishing anything. Maybe another opportunity arises a month from now.
Knowing that you love Jimmy, that you can win with Jimmy Garoppolo, he's got respect in the locker room. Do you hang on
the boat?
Yeah. Do you hang on to him into training camp and see if another quarterback gets hurt? All of a sudden, there's big value there for you. Or if you're like, what if Trey Lance turns an ankle, right?
Yeah,
breaks a leg and, knock on wood, breaks a leg in training camp or something. And if you've already gotten rid of Jimmy Garoppolo, now you're down to Nate Sudfeld.
So you might get a second instead of a fifth.
There is some value to that. I don't know if Jimmy himself wants to go through that again and would even show up to training camp.
I don't know if that's great for the player.
I do think they need to figure something out the next few weeks, unless he's not cleared to throw yet. But once he's cleared to throw, that's really the thing. We find out tomorrow, Jimmy Garoppolo's cleared. Okay, injury guarantee gone for the 49ers, so they can really just release him. He'll be able to throw for other teams. Maybe we'll see some movement there, but that's the next thing. Jimmy, once Jimmy's cleared, we'll find out what the 49ers' intentions are. They might just release him that day.
Yeah, I think he'll end up in Cleveland when it's all said and done.
Makes sense. I mean, it makes perfect sense. I like it. Okay. Baker Mayfield trade. I like it. It's fun early July. Training camp hasn't even started, but there's still fireworks, and there might be another domino to fall before teams report to training camp. Of course, Matt and I have got you covered about the league every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen. Make sure you're checking out the rest of the Locked On NFL channel. The Locked On NFL YouTube channel is the home of Peacock and Williamson. Hit subscribe. Tell a friend. Your team is covered no matter the sport here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Matt and I back tomorrow right here, Peacock and Williamson.